Okay, welcome back to another episode of Caffeine Fueled Ventures. We got another exciting topic for you today. We did say we'd come back to this one. We spoke a little while back about offering free shipping, and we did say that we weren't going to talk about returns in that episode. So we've come back today to talk about returns. Quick intro then. Please like, follow, subscribe, share, do all of that lovely stuff. Honestly, it really helps us. We're across 2 different platforms, really. So we're here on YouTube, if you're with us on YouTube, and we're also on podcasts. So if you've been watching us for a while on YouTube, we'd love you to come over and listen to us on podcasts as well when you're maybe on your commute if you're returning to work. So yeah, without further ado, I want to kick off and just start to have a bit of a conversation with yourself, Jake, about returns, really. So I think the kind of first thing to really think about is, should I offer returns? So, if you've got a store, when we talk about a store, this could either, and we're really focusing on, online stores, really. So this could either be your own store, or you could be hosted on Amazon, or, you might be using Etsy, whatever it might be. But should I offer returns? And the first thing you've really got to think about is the rules, I think, because unfortunately, depending on where you are based or where you are shipping to, you have to, abide by the rules of those markets. So some of the things that you really need to think about if you're, in the UK, and I haven't gone into looking at country level because I'm sure this is going to be applicable across many other countries in Europe. And, it's probably applicable in the US, but I think you need to do your own research. But here in the UK, certainly you as a consumer are protected by the distance selling regulations. Which essentially means that if you have purchased something from afar, i.e. from the internet, you have the right to reject it because you haven't actually seen the product. And that kind of covers and allows people for where, they haven't fully understood what it was that they were purchasing, or, they haven't fully, or it didn't quite match the description, or whatever it might be, that regulation is protecting them. So you've got to kind of think about that a little bit. The thing is as well, though, is that you have to also understand whether or not you're selling a custom product. Because if you're selling a custom product, technically, now it gets a bit grey, but technically you don't have to offer returns. Reason you don't have to offer returns is because essentially you've custom made that product for, somebody has essentially asked you to make a product for them. It can only really be sold to them unless you find somebody else that wants that exact same product. So therefore, you've created it, you've gone to cost, and you can't resell it. So actually in that instance, you don't have to offer returns. But one thing you do have to think about is that they could make a case that their statutory rights still apply. So they can still make a case. So for example, if it turned up not as described, or God, I can't really think of, for reasons, but they could come up with reasons essentially why they, why you should take it back.
The big one there, I think, is just it's not as described, right? Like, ultimately, that is a big thing with selling on the internet. The description of how something is and the images of that can be a huge thing. Just through selling through eBay, I've encountered several situations like that, just from a personal level. So, where statutory rights realistically are the thing that hold more value than anything else. So yeah, 100% with you on that, dude.
Were you stung by it, or the other way around?
So yeah, a couple of interesting ones where, so first one is I sold something, and on behalf of my mum, actually, it was an electrical item, and essentially it was collection only, and he insisted on sending someone like a courier to come and pick it up because it was a jukebox and he wanted to send a specialist to come and pick it up. So he organized a jukebox specialist, and our condition to allowing that was, yeah, sure, but your guy's going to have to, sign something to certify that it was working when it left us, because we're not taking any responsibility for the delivery. And that stung us. We got stung. So it worked. The guy signed it. yep, no issues. But by the time he got it to, the actual customer, it no longer worked as it did when it left us. So we got stung in the reverse as the seller, even though we clearly articulated, you signed to say it was good, etc., and so on. Now we ended up getting into a big dispute with eBay and PayPal. So you got to be careful as a seller. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's pretty tough, that. I mean, we've noticed it a few times, I guess, across our businesses as well, where maybe not maybe it's not quite from a returns perspective, but certainly sort of a refund, like just a straight up refund perspective, where a customer has reached out to us like 6 months after the fact to say, hey, we haven't, you're laughing because we've by the way, guys, we've had this a couple of times within like an hour of each other. We had like 2 cases kind of come in where 2 separate customers, completely unrelated, different parts of the world actually, came to us and said, hey, we haven't received our goods. What's going on? And we look into it, and it's like, yeah, it was, either delivered or a failed delivery sort of, 6 months ago. And, there's a little bit of, we could go in and track every single customer's orders, but, we'd have thousands. We'd have to go in and track and see whether or not they've arrived. We kind of, rely to a certain extent on knowing, that the customer has received it, and they'll reach out to us, because in these instances, even if we had gone and had a look, actually the tracking has shown as the customer's received it, and 6 months down the line they kind of tell you we haven't received it. And in those instances, it can be tough sometimes, because you kind of feel like actually you haven't been given the opportunity to essentially challenge the courier, because you're well outside of the times at which you could go and challenge it, and you're going to lose money. But in those instances, we typically end up and this might be a theme that we run through the rest of this, but we typically err on the side of just doing the right thing for the customer, because ultimately you have to just take that as part of the cost of doing business, I think.
100%. And the thing is with that, right, dude, I want to kind of get across before we, because it actually segues us in quite nicely to something I was just thinking of. But I want to be clear. We've had a couple of those instances in the last couple of weeks, as Rory says, back to back. That is, 2 customers or 3 customers, whatever, from different parts of the globe, who ordered very significantly different times apart. But ultimately, that's 3 unfortunate situations where we provided tracking, as we do for pretty much every order anyway. Like Rory says, they'd shown us delivered. So as far as we were concerned, they were good to go. But yeah, I just want to kind of emphasize that those were 2 or 3 customers out of, the well over 1,000 orders we shipped last year alone. So small percentage, but that's kind of why Rory says we kind of, in those kind of cases, you have to just swallow it as part of doing business. But that takes me nicely onto what I was thinking, right? So you really got to think about the cost of returns before you go and offer them, right? Because the reason we say this is because, it's not as simple as just, okay, cool, yeah, bring it back into store like it would be if you're, a brick and mortar style store. When you're an online store, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have this shipped back to you. Now, the thing you then also have to consider is which sector you're in, right? Because if you're in a sector where your product only transports so well in one direction, and that's because you've taken extra measures, then getting it back may be particularly expensive. Also, when that product is coming back to you, the reality of that, you've got to realize, is it just the return cost? So, is it another £3-4 to have that product shipped back to you? And then are you actually able to make use of that product? Which is why that custom piece that Rory just mentioned comes into its own. But even if we look away from custom, if it's a set of earpods, for example, there is a high chance, not always, but there is a good chance that due to health and safety, you wouldn't be allowed to sell those again. It's kind of where my mind goes, right? So you've got to consider, not just from a health and safety perspective, but 9 times out of 10, when a product comes back to you, is it in good enough quality or nick, shall we say, to be able to actually ship that out to another customer? Or is it the kind of product that, is it underwear? If that underwear has been opened, I can tell you now, you can't sell it to anyone else. If it's still sealed, it's etc., then okay, yeah, maybe you can get away with it. But the cost of returning isn't exclusive to just the shipping price to get it back to you. It's the overall cost of having it shipped back to you, and then is that product usable again? That's kind of where my head is.
Yeah, 100%. And if you think about it, it's if you go down the route of even trying to safeguard yourself and saying, for example, everyone's bought from an online clothes store before, right? And it says, in order to return the product, it has to come back in the same condition it was shipped in and with the tags all still on it and stuff, blah, blah, blah. So they're protecting themselves somewhat, but ultimately, say you are the clothing retailer, you ship something out, the person tries it on, doesn't like it, sends it back to you. You receive it in what you would consider a not resellable condition. So, for example, the swing tag on it, say that it's a bit ripped or something like that. Somebody might make an argument, well, it's still absolutely perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But from your perspective, you might just be like, well, I'm not okay to ship that back out to a customer, so that's now a write-off. And ultimately, you're not going to then ship that back to the customer because one, well, you're going to have to pay to ship it back to the customer, and two, they're going to make an argument, hey, it's actually kind of fine. So actually, even if you do try to safeguard yourself, you're going to have to build in a little bit of buffer, I think.
100%, man, 100%. And the thing is, it's not just the cost of the return; it's who's going to pay it. Some of the ways you can look around that is, okay, yeah. 1 in 10 products that come back is going to be no good. Okay, well, that's just part of doing business. Going to have to build that into margins. You could have and we'll get onto the operationalizing of things, I'm sure, but ultimately you're going to have to consider, do you cover the cost of shipping, offer free returns? Because, we said today was going to be about offering returns. We didn't necessarily say, it was only free returns, right? So let's look at it from both perspectives. Maybe you do want to offer returns, and that's going to come at a cost to the customer, not necessarily the full cost of shipping. Maybe just a surcharge. Shipping costs you £4, and you're going to charge the customer £2. As a way of kind of not deterring them, but making sure that when they're going to return something, they're sure they want to return it, or whether you do it as free. So yeah, something to really consider.
Yeah, it's a good point, mate. I mean, like you say, subsidizing it is a nice way to go. I think you kind of you're half in it. That it feels equitable, doesn't it? It's like you're kind of, you're giving a little bit, you're taking a little bit. And I mean, we have different, for Jake and I, we have different approaches across, our different businesses. Typically, we're more liberal, I would say, in that we're kind of trying to do the right thing for the customer. In the sense where we're selling, when we do custom products, we would take that on a case-by-case basis. I think we probably wouldn't, if somebody just said, actually, I don't want this anymore. Well, that's a different story, really, to, it arrived, we thought it was going to arrive in this amount of time and it didn't quite arrive in time, and it, it wasn't there for their birthday, things like that. We would take it on a case by case, I think.
100%.
And kind of talking about that with the custom bit, it's like when you think about, your business model, a lot of online businesses, whether you like it or not, whether you consider it to be a dirty word or not, are drop shipping products. They're essentially, they're doing the marketing side of things. So the other thing they have to consider is if they offer returns, it's gone from I don't touch the product to I ship the product, they don't want it, it now ends up back at my house and I don't know what to do with it. So that's something else you've got to think about.
Yeah, 100%. And the whole, as you say, drop shipping, dirty word, you've really got to consider, maybe there's a difference there between drop shipping and print on demand, but ultimately they're achieving the same thing, right? And maybe with drop shipping, you can be a little bit more easygoing with it. Yes, you will end up with some stuff back to you, but print on demand, you've really got to dig into, is that a custom product? Now, just because you printed it on demand doesn't make it a custom product. So you do need to consider that. If you're just selling a standardized design, but you're printing on demand, that does not make it custom. So you should really think about that and the regulations we kind of mentioned. But yeah, 100%. So,
Yeah.
all right. So
Yeah.
we kind of covered off a couple of the ways that you should think about, returns, right, dude? So probably we should start thinking, okay, so if a company, or if someone's decided that they're going to offer returns, how and what are options for doing that? I don't know. Have you got any ideas on that?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I guess the first thing you want to think about, and I know you touched on it before, but are you going to offer it as free? When you talk about returns, instantly in your head, because I think a lot of people are used to it. With a lot of bigger companies, the returns are just free. But actually, when you dig down to it, and a lot of smaller companies, and actually a lot of bigger companies, the returns aren't free. You pay the returns as the consumer. So one of the things you could do is offer free returns as a USP. So you actually, all right, you're going to swallow the cost, but what you could do is make it a USP, and then you can, as part of your marketing strategy, as what we'd call, a sort of a converter or a get someone over the line. You could kind of, when they're in the checkout, and a lot of people go onto the site, they find the thing they want, and then they go all the way through to the checkout, and then it's at that checkout point actually that they're making the decision on, do you think do you think that they accept returns, etc. And if you could have in your cart page, free returns, easy returns, whatever it might be, I think that is a really good way to start to, offer returns, but offer it as a USP.
Mate, absolutely. It's an objection buster. It is. Yeah. That's the word you were looking for. I know you were, so don't worry, I got you.
Yeah,
but
you got me.
Yeah, whether you offer free returns as an objection buster, that is a USP on its own. So you've really got to give that some consideration, right? So, other thing you can try, and we've certainly looked into this and tried this in the past, right, and still do. If it's a consumable style product, one thing you can consider, instead of just outright returns, you could offer what we could call money back guarantee, money back promise, wordsmith it however you like. But ultimately what you're promising to the customer is, look, yes, I understand my item might not be the most expensive. We're not talking a sofa here, we're talking consumable items, whether that be a Schmall as an example. I use Schmall for my laundry and dishwasher. They are a great service that basically delivers my laundry tablets and dishwasher tablets to the door, right? It's a subscription. So you could look at offering free returns in that regard. Well, yeah, free returns is great. That gives the customer the chance to send it back and at no cost. But offering a money back promise, now that's better, because essentially, especially when offering a subscription, a money back promise, you're able to get someone to sign up to something like a subscription, but they feel comfortable that, okay, I like the concept of this. I'm nervous. I don't want to get caught in a subscription that I don't like the first one, and therefore I don't want it. But by offering a money back promise, you're saying to them, yeah, okay, cool. Look, if you don't like this, well, not only are we gonna get you to return it, we're also going to give you your money back with no quibble. Now, the practicalities of that, if it's a cheaper item and your costs are reasonable, you may determine that you don't even want to have the customer return it, because the cost of having it returned might outweigh the value when you try to resell it, right? Or, if it's consumable, there's a chance you can't resell it, because 9 times out of 10, for them not to have liked a consumable, they have to have tried it. Okay, so think about it. If someone tried to sell you a bottle of Diet Coke and, half the bottle was missing, you'd be peed off, right? So, for a consumable, 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to insist the customer gives it back to you. So just offering that is a huge objection buster that breaks down that wall. But
completely, man. And I mean, the other thing that you have to really think about is, what are the chances that you're going to receive, and I know I spoke about it before, but you're going to receive the goods back in a resellable condition,
Yeah.
even if that is what you stipulate. Like, it's just exactly as you say, right? With consumable goods, all right, somebody's tried it, something like that. But say, for example, you say, you offer returns, it's consumable goods, but only if they haven't tried it. But then how do you know that it's been stored at the correct temperature in order for it to still be, it hasn't grown mold or whatever? I don't know the technicalities, but, how can you ensure that it has been in the right environment for you to, be able to wholeheartedly ship it back out and pass the red face test? So I think, it's all really good points. You just have to, and I think this is a running theme through this, you've got to identify what is it that you're selling. What are the stipulations within the country that you're selling to and stuff, and then kind of also what's your ethos, like as a business owner, what do you want to project and what do you feel comfortable with? And I think one of the things, and I think I'd like to move on to maybe the sort of like, how do you actually, so we talked, a bit about should you offer them, how you should offer them. And then I think what we should talk about is like sort of, it's a how again, kind of, but we're using the term like, how do you operationalize? How do you actually physically offer it? And what we haven't touched too much on yet really is when you don't have the choice. If you're in the likes of an Amazon, for example, so I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Kind of what happens in the situation where you don't have a choice.
Yeah, man. At the end of the day, they're not having a choice. Actually, you're right. Amazon's a great place where actually 9 times out of 10 the choice is taken out of your hands. Other marketplaces, ultimately, come back to my eBay example earlier. Whether we gave the guy a refund wasn't actually up to us. It went to a panel at eBay, and don't get me wrong, they didn't have a clue what they were talking about. Clearly, foolish bunch, but still, that's just ultimately Amazon, eBay, etc. marketplaces. You're gonna have a lot less say in the decision, and ultimately, Etsy's another good example. Yes, 9 times out of 10. You can say no or whatever, but they can also raise a case against you. And if they are not satisfied with your response and don't feel that you've taken them seriously, or they don't feel that you've at least tried to solve their problem, they can continue to raise it. And in a marketplace, whether or not you get to keep the customer's money is up to the marketplace. So really give that some thought. The thing that, the consumable one, the great example that I can think of there is, just because it's been returned doesn't mean if I think about my small example where, they're sending out laundry tabs, just because I send them back, I might not have used them. I just decided I didn't want them or whatever. Maybe I've used one and they've got 23 that they can resell. Great. But they don't know whether I put, I could have injected something into the tablets, or I could have coated the tablets in, I don't know, a bleach, and therefore that bleach might ruin someone else's clothes, etc. So yeah, operationalizing a return in a marketplace, in all honesty, you're just going to have to follow 9 times out of 10 the marketplace's procedures. If you're on your own website and you're running a Shopify store, one of the key ones that we really could consider if you're doing huge volume. If you're not doing huge volume, I just push on and do them yourself. If you're doing significant volume, your name's Gymshark. Think about how they do returns. Yeah, they use a provider, a volume return provider, and I think it's Rebound off the top of my head. And essentially, Rebound is an app that you plug in, and it manages the customer's return for you, and through software at your own warehouse, you can handle that. So yeah, maybe consider, if you are running your own website, to try a returns provider.
Yeah, it's a good idea to kind of, take that burden off your hands. I imagine the thing you have to consider with a returns provider is that they are most likely going to be charging you a premium for that. So you have to build that into the cost of your product somehow. Ultimately, I'm assuming Gymshark has a good enough margin that they can, outsource their returns. The other thing that I think that, and I obviously don't know the kind of operations and finance structure of Gymshark, but I'm assuming a big consideration for them using that outsourced provider is that they aren't physically taking that stock back onto their books until it's in a resaleable condition and it's ready to kind of go back out. Because that's one of the things, you know, we've certainly noticed through some of our businesses before, especially where, you know, we might have done, we might have done a print on demand product, and we've accepted a return. Well, now all of a sudden that is sat on our books. We went from having never touched the product. I know I mentioned it before, but think about this financially, right? You've never touched the product. It has gone from your print-on-demand service provider, and it's gone to the customer. For whatever reason, you've accepted a return. Well, your print-on-demand's not going to take that. That wasn't their return to take. Maybe if it was late, they might do something about it, but the chances are they're not accepting returns on your behalf. So you take a return, and they ship it to you. All of a sudden, you've got stock. So it's not just the management of that stock in terms of financially, but it's like, what are you going to, you know, are you now going to have your own logistics setup for reshipping that product? You know, it might be easy for you, but, you know, if you're trying to stay completely, you're trying to focus on the marketing aspect of your business and not the internal logistics side of things, you start to blur the lines a bit, don't you?
Yeah, and 100%. It's not even just the cost that comes with that, right? So think about it, right? So you've got something small, you know, let's talk mugs. Maybe if you have to take a customer's mug back that was print on demand but wasn't custom, the space taken up in your area, your office, your warehouse, whatever, is pretty small. But, you know, obviously if you had a warehouse, you're probably not doing print on demand or drop shipping. But let's assume, you know, you're working out your house or working out a very, very small office. If it's a mug, it's pretty small. Imagine you've sold a large style wall canvas. Well, that's going to take up a fair amount of space, not just the cost that it's going to eat up onto your books, right? So you've got to really consider that sort of stuff. Just because you've taken a return on a product, you're going to have to find somewhere to store it. And if it's a full scale, you know, I don't know, A5 or larger, or sorry, A3 or larger, probably is better terms, you're going to need some space. But yeah, I think, dude, I think we've covered this pretty well. So got anything else to add before I round us up?
No, I think that was really good. I enjoyed having the conversation with you, mate.
100%, man. As always, delight to chat to you. I say that as if we're not going to hang up and then continue chatting, but never mind. For everyone that's joined us today, thank you so much. We tried a new format. We hope you liked it. And for anyone that can't see right now, Rory is lucky I didn't do the intro, so I'm going to call him out. This is surprisingly unusual. So I'm sat here in a blue or black style shirt, which, you know, I'm quite a loud folk. Mr. Orchard over there is sat in a bright, luminous, for anyone that is on YouTube, you can see a bright, luminous, highlighted green and or yellow t-shirt. So if you aren't on YouTube, I'd suggest you check it out. He looks incredible, but surprisingly unusual for Mr. Orchard.
Thank you very much.
More of the muted fella out of the two of us, but nonetheless, thanks for joining us. Subscribe, comment, like Rory mentioned at the beginning, and yeah, till next time, laters.
Cheers.